Okay, so we're recording this as usual, and if you looked at the last recording, I got a pleasant surprise when I looked at it to see that our names do not appear. So I have set it, there are different modes you can set in Zoom settings. Some modes you can record speaker view, so it will record the person who's speaking in big. The problem with that is that if someone coughs and they're not muted, they will appear big on your recording. And you know, we don't mind that so much in class, but on a recording that's kind of awkward. So I have it set to gallery view, and you see all of the boxes, and then you'll see the screen share is another option. I have set to record the screen shares, but our names don't appear at all. So that's a change, because I know that wasn't the case a few months ago with Zoom's update. So yeah, thanks again for being here. Whoa. All right, people still coming. So let's start with, I'm going to share my screen and just do a little quick review of what we talked about on Thursday. On Thursday, we worked with the Zoom host tools and talked a lot about security also. We talked about teaching tools, and we're going to go the next level down on that here. And we did a sample lesson, and we talked a little bit about the progression of a lesson. So today we're going to do more practice with Zoom teaching tools, and specifically whiteboards and annotation, which are a little bit of a strange beast I find in Zoom, but they can be very useful if you're comfortable using them. And we'll talk next about lesson progression, and also about a new sample lesson, assuming we have time. We'll have time at least for part of it. Homework. Several of you sent me great lesson examples, thinking about lessons that you did in person with your students, and now thinking about how you would do them online. I gave some of you comments. I'm not going to share those examples today. Mainly, I wanted you to have a lesson in mind when we talk about this next set of teacher tools, the annotation and the whiteboard, and then go back to that lesson that you wrote up as homework for last time and see, okay, would I still do it this way? What alternatives can I think of? Just because you have alternatives doesn't necessarily mean you should use them. The way you thought about it the first time might be the best way to use it. And as we've talked about before, technology for technology's sake is not always the best way to go. But if you have that lesson in your mind, you can think about how you might adapt it to be even more effective. All right, and we'll talk more specifically about specific lessons on Thursday. So any questions so far before we get into the next set? Silence. Okay.
No question.
All right. Great. So here we go. We're going to talk about, we're going to work more with screen sharing, because it's really, for me, if there's only one tool that I'm going to use on Zoom, this is the one, because it's so valuable for students to be able to see, excuse me, see what we're talking about, either whether it's pictures or whether it's writing. And before we practice, I just wanted to talk for a couple of minutes about advantages and disadvantages of different applications, because you can share, as you now know, you can share anything, any application that you have on your computer, and share a movie application or Microsoft Word or Pages or Slides or PowerPoint or pretty much anything you want. If you're going to be using your shared screen as a whiteboard, like to type on it for students, there are some advantages and disadvantages for different ones. So first, I'll show you a lesson that I did with beginners. I can't remember if we looked at this one earlier, but on slides. I used Google Slides, but you can think of this as PowerPoint or as, I can't remember what the Apple one is like, but what it's called. But basically, we got into the lesson. I started out with just saying, how do you feel today? This was my diagnostic. I wanted to see what they would come back with. And everything that's in purple is what I typed in response to what students, or in a couple of cases, teachers who were with me said. And then we looked at some of these. She feels, I had an underline here to see if students could give me the word. She feels happy. He feels angry. This was an interesting one to explain the meaning of jealous. So this worked really well in the slide format, and I had different pictures in different slides. So that was easy. I didn't need a lot of text. Another lesson that I did with the same class, I used a document format. So this is Google Docs, but you could think of this as Microsoft Word or Pages or any of those more document. And here we had been talking about work. And so we came into the next class on this. This was my opening question, is what is your job? Usually I start lessons with a question. I like that. I don't want to be doing all the work. And students told me all of these things, everything that I had in purple. And if I had been on a slide, I would have been expanding my box and trying to fit everything and moving the box around. Whereas on a document, clearly you have a lot more flexibility if you want to go a little more free form.
Linda, if I may interrupt for a second,
please.
How is it that you are able to have so many tabs open? I'm seeing inbox, lower level plan, June #3, and then the page we're on now, then 2020-04-15, etc., etc. Because if I have a lot of tabs open, then that conflicts with my ability to share pages, or maybe it's my internet connection. I don't know.
It shouldn't be an issue. You can, it's just cognitively for me as a teacher, it's easiest if I have as few tabs open as possible and only ones that I'm going to use during class.
Right.
But if you share your screen, if you share when you click on the share screen button and you see the options, if you choose an option that says desktop,
right,
the picture will show whatever's in front, the tab that's open.
Right.
But then you can, as you can see, I can move between my different tabs.
Right.
And you see what I'm sharing. So as long as you choose an option that says desktop, anything that you put on your desktop, different tabs or whatever, the students will see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. So here I put pictures also. And, you know, while I could have put pictures on a slide, this was really easy. It just gave me more room to work. I didn't know what students were going to tell me. And here's what we got for this one. A lot of different interpretations of that picture, which was kind of fun. If you have, I don't know if I have them on this slide. If you have items that you want to be all together, as you type, everything's going to move down in your document. So you might have to readjust. You might have to delete some lines or whatever to bring so if I wanted all of this, if I had typed all of this beforehand in preparation for my class, and I wanted it to be all on one page, but my typing, because I'm typing above, then when I get to this, it's partly on one page and partly on another. So, you know, not really a big deal. I'll just add more returns and get it back on one page. But that's something, if you have a story in your document or something where you want each picture to be with the text that it comes with, and you're typing above in the document using that as your whiteboard, your picture and your text might get separated by a page, and you might have to, you know, align them. So for something like that, what I might do is is just put the story in a different document and move over to it. A lot of stories we looked quickly at that Ndiswa soccer star story from the African storybook collection. And you'll notice that I was underlining and doing things on that screen. A lot of times when I see there are some great stories available for beginners, particularly online, I will copy them and paste them into a document. So then I can edit, I can make the text bigger. Often those things were not really designed to be projected. And if you have students watching class or participating in class from a phone, they'll be really small. So this just gives me more flexibility. And doing that on slides would just be cumbersome. It would take a long time, but I would open a doc to do that. Other questions?
Linda?
Yeah.
Are you able to see what they're seeing from you, like in a little window? Because sometimes like a student might say, I can't see, but you don't realize that they can't see something. Or like if you're writing all this script and it's going off the page and you didn't really think about it, if you saw a window of what they're seeing, you could, you know, fix that before they even are able to comment.
Yeah, it's the going off the page is maybe not such a big issue like it was with the overhead projectors or something like that, because your documents don't allow you to do that. But there could be times. Another teacher gave me the idea of logging into my class on my phone at the same time.
Okay.
And just making sure you have your sound off, and that way you can just glance down and you can see what they're seeing.
Pretending you're a participant, like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that would be the way to do it. Okay.
Yeah. Good question. So the other questions between these are using something like Google Docs, like I'm using here, Slides, or Google Doc in Google Drive, versus Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or something that's on your desktop. And from the standpoint of what you're doing in class, I don't see any difference really. I would use whatever you're most comfortable with. One of the reasons that I like using Google Docs is then I can take the link, share it, and send it to my students. And I don't have to upload anything or copy anything. They can have the exact thing with all the silly things that we typed while we were in class. They get exactly that. And they can do homework with it or just read it. Or some folks here have said that they like going into the recording after class just sort of to go over what we do. The more time our students are interacting with our material, the better.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
When you let a student use your Google Docs or have access to it, how do you limit what they should not have access to?
With Google Docs or Google Drive, you share one document at a time. You send the link just to that document, and you can set the permission so that they can only view the document.
I see.
You can also set the permission so they could comment or they can edit if you want to do some groupthink. Depending on the technological and language levels of your students, you might choose to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, easy to control.
Students do have to have a Google account though to be able to. They don't?
They don't actually. With Google Slides and with all of the Google Drive, you can set the permissions to share so that anyone with the link can view, or anyone with the link can edit, or anyone with the link can comment. And so if they have a browser and an internet connection, they can click on it and get access to it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So for example, the slides that I shared in the homework, those are Google Slides. Some of you may have Gmail accounts and some may not, and you can still just click on that link and see the document, as long as I have set the permissions correctly. April's laughing. She's done that. Okay, so we're going to go into breakout rooms just somewhat briefly. And I just want you to have a blank document open on your computer. It can be anything that you want, Word, PowerPoint, slides, pages, whatever. and try it. Just take turns. Share your document, ask your roommate, your classmate some questions, type on it, make sure they can see it, play with the font size. They can give you feedback on that, and then have the other person do the same thing. Sound okay?
Yes.
All right. If you have, whoops, looks like we have an even number of people today. Awesome. If you have questions or need help or whatever, you know how to use the help button. All right. I'll give you not too long, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, something like that. Okay. Here we go. All right, we're back. So I know for some people that probably felt like too much time, and other people were working through problems or questions. What questions do you have?
Well, I have a question.
Yes,
So
Deborah.
I had the Word doc open, a blank, but I couldn't easily, Deborah was helping me, I couldn't easily get to Google where I could have had many tabs open.
So if you have, when you are sharing your desktop, you can use the Alt tab or Command tab, depending if you're on Alt tab if you're a Windows machine, Command tab if you're on a Mac, to get to other applications.
Oh, yes, I forgot. Okay, great. Thank you.
You can also, if you exit full screen is when the Zoom screen goes to all the corners, all the sides of your computer screen. If you click that button in the top right hand corner that says exit full screen, then you will be able to see your toolbars and other things that you have that allow you normally to open other applications. And that's a good way to do it too.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay.
I think there's somebody is asking a question about Spotlight.
Yeah, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Chat.
So I ran into this in our previous meeting, but I guess I have my security settings pretty high on my computer for Zoom. And so when I went to use Spotlight, it wanted to access my settings to change them. And while I was trying to engage with that, it started opening up other applications.
So you're talking about the annotation tools?
Yes, the annotation tool Spotlight engaged with my computer in such a way that it opened Apple News, which seems a little weird.
So let's move on to talking about annotation in just a minute, okay?
Okay.
But yeah, that's a little concerning. So other things that you might want to share. We have looked at some of these before. Lots of non-tech things to share, right on your screen. It's easy to do show and tell. I had something that I was doing with students, had a story that, it was the soccer star story. He said, put his hands on his hips. Students didn't really understand what that meant, so I just stood up and demonstrated it. And sometimes that's the easiest way, to do things. Absolutely. There are videos, there are online grammar exercises. I promised that I would show the pencil trick.
What is TPR?
TPR is total physical response. It's just when you're asking students to use their bodies to show you something, to physically, if you're pouring, to take something and pour it, or to stand up or sit down or jump, anything that's physical. Okay, I'm going to stop this share and whoops, wrong button. Here we go. Try this again, sorry. Okay, I'm going to share this desktop. Now, tell me what you're looking at.
The ocean.
The ocean is beautiful.
Your screensaver. Your screensaver.
Background.
Oh, this isn't going to work because I have 2 screens. All right, I'm going to move on from this. I'll figure out a way to show you the pencil trick.
Oh, okay.
I think I have to disconnect one of my screens to show it. That's ocean picture I took when I was teaching in Brazil. Oh, love it. Okay, sequence stories. Here's another example. This is something that I do a lot with students of varying levels in person. Oops. Let's see, would it be helpful if I shared my screen? Okay. This is a 4-part sequence story. There are, if you saw my video teaching ordinal numbers, I was using a 6-part sequence story there. Getting students to describe what's in each of these, what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. Usually when I teach in person, I have maybe an unhealthy relationship with my scissors, and I'm always cutting things up and giving them out and having students put things in order and share things. But you can't do that obviously here, but you still can move things around, you know, have students describe them and move them around. So another idea for sharing.
Hey, Linda.
Where were you able to find those pictures?
That was my question.
If you, I think you Google, if you Google and just say, look for sequence stories or picture sequence stories.
Okay.
You'll find these, you'll find the 3 little pigs, you'll find, not Goldilocks, what's her name? The red, Little Red Riding Hood. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? And you could do a lot with these. You could ask people to describe them and write out the story and tell the story in varying ways. All right, annotation. So some of you have found this already. When you're sharing your screen, you see this button here called Annotate. And when you click on that button, this big toolbar comes up and you have different options. You can draw, you can do text, you can format text, and you can use these, oops, stay here for a second. You can use these in different ways. I can type over here, or over here, or I can circle things. Because one of the hard parts about teaching online is directing our students' attention, right? We can't tell where they're looking at any particular time. We can't point. So this is a way of directing students' attention to where you want it to be directed. There are more tools. Whoops. Okay, so now I'm trying to click on something else, but I'm in a drawing tool. This is a very common problem. I have to go to the mouse. I have to go to this tool right over here to get my mouse functionality back. If you try to click around your screen while you're in text or in draw, it's not going to work.
Oh, okay.
So that when you click on the mouse, you'll get your cursor back. Kim mentioned the Spotlight. I haven't not had that experience with Spotlight. What Spotlight does is it makes it's like using one of those flashlight pointers.
Oh.
I have also had weird experiences with Spotlight. It has taken over my cursor and not wanted to give it back. So
yeah, it asked me to give over control, and I had to change my settings for that, and then it started opening up random stuff. But my person who was sharing my screen with me couldn't see that was happening, so that was interesting.
well, that's good, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyway, I appreciate you bringing that up, Kim. I would just stay away from that one. I haven't had problems with anything else. You can undo if you let's see, I am drawing, whoops, I am drawing, and then I want to undo, or if I've done a lot of things and I want to clear all drawings, you see that it took away the text that I did before. Or you can just unshare your screen and share it again, and the annotation will all go away.
Linda, can you do this on any app that you're sharing?
Great, you're my straight man, Lynn. So any PDF document or any screen anywhere. So This is from a website called Breaking News English. They have PDF lessons with all different kinds of things in them. This obviously is a vocabulary matching, and you can elicit answers from students and then draw a line.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, you want to call their attention to something, organized. Maybe you're working on ED words. You can underline all the ED words, for example.
Does only the host have that annotation?
Okay, so one of your settings is to allow or disallow students from annotating. And if you guys now look up at the top of your bar, you'll see a black, it says view options, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you click on that, you'll see an annotate option. And if you click on the annotate option, you should get that annotate toolbar. And now try it. You should all be able to draw on my screen. Oh, see, someone's.
Oh, I see.
So you can have students do this too.
That's funny. So Linda, what was the site again? You were on here?
This site is Breaking News English.
Oh, Breaking, yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh God, beautiful.
Ha ha ha, control.
Linda, I don't have a spotlight on my annotation bar.
Well, consider yourself lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't either.
Who needs that? Okay.
Yeah, it's not something I would use. Here's another example. Oh, sorry, I meant to open this beforehand. This is a book that Beaverton Literacy Council actually is adopting as our, someone wrote on my screen.
Could you repeat one more time the name of that website? Something English? Breaking news.
Breaking News English.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the link is in the presentation.
Okay.
So this is why it's nice to open things before you actually start.
Right, I'm
The
sorry.
internet is slow. No, it was good. Any more questions while we're waiting for my internet to respond? Here we go. So here's a page, and this is also linked into the presentation. This is a curriculum called Intercambio. They have their books online. They are about to put up a paywall. Beaverton Literacy Council. If you're teaching for Beaverton Literacy, you'll have access anyway because we're buying in. But it's, even if you're not, it's not that expensive. But you can go to full screen, and you can do this with anything you have online. And, you know, work with your students. I'm using the text tool now. Last weekend, Jason went camping, let's say, with some friends. And we can do this together, play, I don't know, guitar. We can do this together with your students. You can use these tools to say this weekend and last weekend.
Linda, do you have to use the zoom ratio to enlarge, you know, this page on your screen? How did you make it larger?
This program, where this curriculum is posted, has a zoom bar right over here.
Okay. Cool.
I just used that.
Cool.
So you can see when you move it around, the annotations stay where they were. So if you're going to move to a different part of the page, you have to clear the drawings, or you can unshare, share again. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, any questions? All right, so we're going to go back into breakout rooms for a few minutes, and this is what I'd like you to do. I want you to open, oh, yes, sorry, I'm going to send you a link. We're going to use the technology for this. I'm going to send you a link in chat. Yeah, that's the one I want. And I want you to go into chat and copy that link and paste it into your browser, because you know how to toggle back and forth. Whoops.
I lost it.
Everyone good? Any questions? Again, some people will be able to just click on that link in the chat box, and other people will have to cut and paste it. And now we're going to go back into breakout rooms that I want you to practice just one more time. Going to that weather page and, you know, thinking about what you might do in a lesson. So take turns sharing your screen and using the annotation tool to call your classmates' attention to various things. All right, any questions before we go? You know where the question mark button is. Here we go.
Linda, have you got any thoughts about the best kind of time sessions, like how long to do sessions for before people need a break, things like that? Like, is it different than in a classroom? Because in some ways, I feel like people might get tired more quickly because they're just looking at a screen the whole time, but then the breaks could be maybe shorter.
It is a really good question. We had actually quite a long discussion about this last night at the Beaverton Literacy Board meeting, because we're working on the million details for the program in the fall.
Okay.
And for the lower levels especially, I believe, and others agreed with me, an hour is about all you can do.
That seems long.
It does seem long.
Yeah.
You know, if you think of in-person classes so often being an hour and a half to 2 hours even. When I teach a 2-hour class in person, I do give a break. But even with the upper level classes, you could go maybe a little bit longer, but you have to have different kinds of things prepared. So, you know, in class, maybe you could spend 20 minutes on a book, right? On whatever's in your book. Whereas in online, maybe that's 10 or 15. You want to be able to mix it up with other kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot has to do with the different activities you're doing. And if you're not just instructing the whole time and expecting them to listen the whole time. Absolutely.
I mean, you wouldn't want to teach like that in person either, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So,
but if you, so it's actually a good reminder to integrate practice in your lesson, right? Conversation practice. Make sure students get a lot of chance to speak. So if we're doing something where they have to pay attention to the screen, whether it's a video or it's a book like the Intercambio or whatever it is, some online grammar lesson, we might do that for 5 or 10 minutes, maybe probably 10. These are adults after all. And then we'll come back and I'll stop screen sharing and ask questions, and we'll try to get them to ask one another questions. For example, this is even with the level 2 we were doing this. Actually, we were doing this even with the level 0s and 1s to get them interacting and talking, and it sort of breaks that up, and then we can go back to the screen if that's what the next part of the lesson does.
How do you get them to do the collaborative work? Do you do breakout rooms even though you're not supervising, or do you like try to just have it as a group where you ask them to call on each other and then you're just all observing?
It depends on the size of the class and the level of the students. I was teaching all spring. I was teaching a level 2 class, so high beginners, with 3 students. And there we just, you know, these were actually students that I had in my in-person class too. So they were comfortable with one another and they called on one another, and we did not use breakout rooms. Mm-hmm. I have done sort of 5, 6, even 7 in one room without breakout rooms at the lower levels. The lower levels, I wouldn't really send them into breakout rooms by themselves.
Right.
Unless you have a very, very well-defined task. which is possible. I taught a big beginner class this spring with several teacher assistants. So we met together like this, and then if I had 4 teacher assistants, we had 4 breakout rooms. So each group of students had a teacher in there. With the upper levels, intermediate and above, we send them into breakout rooms by themselves. And it's really interesting to see student leadership skills. I would go, and other teachers with me would go. We might have 2 or 3 teachers in 8 breakout rooms. And so we will wander around and pop into the breakout rooms like I have done with some of them here. And you see it, and sometimes it's surprising to see which students are saying, okay, let's talk about the next question now.
Okay. Yeah.
We give them well-defined things to do while they're in there. And we teach them about the help button.
Okay, yeah.
Other questions?
I have a question about using tutors and how, if you're just doing the breakout, like saying randomly assign rooms, is there a way you can like make sure you put like a tutor with each group, or how would you do that?
Yeah, there is. And actually on Thursday, we're going to spend time talking specifically about breakout rooms. But when I create a breakout room, first of all, I can have the computer create them, or I can do it 100% manually. So I was co-teaching this level 0, 1, 2. It was a little bit of a circus, but we had 15 or so students and 3 to 5 other teachers, and we met together, and then we all went into breakout rooms. But it was a mixed level. There's a big difference between a level 0 and a level 2. And so I wanted to group the students by level with a teacher they were familiar with. And you'll see more on Thursday, but Zoom gives you the capabilities to do all that. Sometimes it has a sense of humor. It puts, if you have it do breakout rooms automatically, it will put all the teachers together, you know. Other questions? Okay. I wanted to share a sample lesson with you, as always. And this is a lesson that I used the same materials for 2 different lessons, and I've put them both in here as sort of A and B. And this is not probably 2 things that I would do on the same day. Of course, depends if some of this is repeat or review, or you've done this before. But I had these students, any lesson that had to do with food was always a hit. So the objective of this lesson was to work on commands, and what better than a recipe to have commands in there. So we looked at the soup first. Before getting into this, we talked about soup, we talked about cooking. We've had lots of conversations with these students about cooking. And we read this, all this language was within their grasp. They were able to read it. We did read and repeat. We identified the command verbs and maybe underlined them, wash and cut. We talked about how the cookbook does not say you wash, you cut. It just says wash, cut. I had prepared the second one where I had taken out the verbs, and we tried to remember what they were. Then we split them around and I gave them the verbs, and we didn't necessarily use the same ingredients that soup did, but we had a different way of using these commands. And we did this over the course of a couple of lessons, I think. Then we made our own recipe for fruit salad this time, because they all know about fruits. And we talked about other ways that you use commands, that we use commands. Wash the carrots, right? There's no you, but when we're giving directions, when we're talking to our children, when we're giving an emergency command. And I would elicit okay, when you're talking to your children, what else do you need to tell them to do? And we typed in, brush your teeth, go to bed, eat your dinner. And commands are there's a lot of cultural element. A lot of languages have very different command structures depending who you're talking to. So in English, it's actually simpler than in a lot of places. Questions?
It's good.
Fruit salad sounds good.
It does, doesn't it? So again, we went from supported, less supported, and then creating our own recipe was very independent. And I always have the students help one another if one student's trying to say something, and then our extension and expansion was going out to other kinds of things. We came back to the same kind of idea to teach count versus non-count nouns. And this is something ugly that I know a lot of teachers shy away from and confuses a lot of people. But it's when they're already familiar with the cucumbers, tomatoes, carrots, and you've kind of already talked about them, it's a good way to talk about, to introduce this concept. So we sort of walked through and just read through without talking too much what they are. And then the counting or non-counting. Can you count? This makes it pretty visible. How many grains of rice? And you can support this by typing under it or just talk about it. And another example, can you count how many bananas? How many grains of salt? We don't know, or how much salt. So first identifying, because in order to know whether you say how many or how much, you have to know whether it's count or non-count. So first just identifying, I asked them to give me, and they got this pretty well, listing different kinds of things that are count or non-count. And then we just focused on one half, the count nouns, because if you introduce too much in contrast when everything is new, they're not going to remember what goes with what. So we focused on count nouns. I have a lot of, I have some, how you could say that. We did a lot of examples, and with this group, the examples were mostly to do with food. Then we went into asking questions. How many do you need? How many do you have? And a lot of work that way. Probably the next lesson, I would construct something similar with the nouns in red. So I would go back and do these exact same kinds of things, except with the non-count nouns, and keep them in red for the visual differentiation.
Very cool.
Questions? All right, crystal clear, right? All right, we are out of time. Thank you so much for your good humor today, as usual. I will send you, thanks. I will send the recording, a link with the recording to this in case you want to see it again or pass it along, and the slides, and some more specific requests for homework, which are going to involve going back to your lesson plan, thinking about it some more, expanding it, and thinking about a few more things for Thursday. All right?
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.